Hey you guys, also showing here again to finish up on Smokey Robinson. Yeah, to finish up on Smokey Robinson.
We found her in the small study-like room that only had 2 candles on the desk. I recognized her at once as the dark, thin-lipped woman who had spoken for the opposition.
So before I move on further, Smokey Robinson do not have dark colored eyes. I want to show you guys something about Smokey Robinson. I believe that Smokey Robinson have green eyes, okay? I think it's green. So I'm gonna show you just how to do his eye color. So this is color, this is the premium color apple green. It's the premium color apple green. Now you could go for this or another shade. You can use honey. You can use even honey.
Her expression remained unchanged, but she was evidently forming a different judgment of the type of man she had to deal with. Neither his reply nor its manner had been quite what she had expected. She showed that aspect of her time back to me. Were you in that too?
But I just wanted to show you what color to use with his eyes. So you want to use green, the premium color green and gold. Once you use the premium color green and gold, you want to get the premium color black. Put the black at the middle part of the eye. Okay, at the middle part of the eye. Then you want to just make little lines around his eyes. This is my version of a cartoon eye. This is a cartoon. Okay, this is what you need to do for Smokey Robinson eye. And then you want to get the crazy art white and just smooth the whole thing out. And that's how you get Smokey Robinson eyes. This is how I make Smokey Robinson eyes. But this, not his eye color. This, his eye color, okay? This is eyes. That's not his eyes, okay? So don't do that. Okay, let's get back to work on Smokey Robinson. So, let's do his hair. His little curly fro. Let's do his curly fro. So, I'm just gonna go around in circles on his curly fro. Okay. And I'm using the premium color black.
I seem to know that name now. Did she stand in the Conservative interest in the last election? I don't think so. She did vote for once and admitted she began. Then I saw a regulation law. Oh, that. Well, really, Mr. Mason, I can scarcely think she would be the sort of person to care for in the kind of community we are building here. In the corridor outside, Coco turned to me. There was just enough of the twilight left for me to see his grin. A somewhat aggressive philosophy around things blunt. The grin disappeared as he added, rather tightly like Pride and Prejudice. She's wanting help. She knows she needs it bad if nothing's going to make her admit it. He paused opposite an open door. It was almost too dark now to make out anything in the room.
Shut my hands. It's raining outside, so I'm having bad arthritis problem.
I'm going to have a word with these chaps. See you later. I watched him stroll into the room and greet him collectively with a cheerful, "Watch your mates. How's it going?" And then made my own way back to the dining room. came from 3 candles set close together on one table. Close beside them a girl appeared exasperated and said, "Hello," she said. "Awful, isn't it? No one asked if they managed to do anything after dark in the old days." Not such old days either.
And just lightly going across his hair, but we will darken his hair at that out, down, whatever you want to say.
I suppose so. She raised her head and regarded me. "You came from London today?" "Yes," I admitted. "It's bad there now." "It's finished," he said. "I did," I said briefly. "How long have you been here?" She gave me the general picture of things without more encouragement. Gogo's raid on the university building had netted but half a dozen of the sighted. She and Miss Durrant had been 2 of those overlooked. During the following day, Miss Durrant had taken a somewhat ineffective charge.
Now I'm gonna get my crazy art
Only one among them had ever attempted to drive a lorry.
white.
During that day and most of the next, they had been in almost the same relationship to their party.
The crazy art white seems to smooth it out a lot.
But during the later part of the second day, Michael Beatley and 2 others returned. And during the night, a few more had struggled back. By noon the day after that, they had drivers for a dozen vehicles. They had decided that it was more prudent to leave forthwith than to wait on the chance that others would come.
I'm trying to see, do I want to go darker with it before I go any further?
Destination for little better reason than that it was known to the Colonel as a place which could offer the compact seclusion which was one of the qualities they
Do I want to go darker?
It had been an ill-assorted party.
I think I'm gonna try to go darker.
The day after their arrival, there had been
Yeah, I think I'm gonna try to go darker.
otherwise not unsimilar to that held earlier at the university building. Michael and his section had announced that there was much to be done, and that it was not their intention to waste their energies in pacifying.
I'm gonna end up doing another picture of Smokey Robinson.
Business was too big for them, and time too pressing.
This time with the right eye color.
What had happened to the world was warning enough. How anyone could be so blindly ungrateful for the miracle that had preserved them, as even to contemplate the perpetuation of the subversive theories which had been undermining the Christian faith for a century she was unable to understand. For her part, she had no wish to live in a community where one section would be continually striving to pervert the simple faith of those who were not ashamed to show their gratitude to God by keeping his laws. She was no less able to see that the situation was serious. The proper course was to pay full heed to the warning God had given, and turn at once to his teaching.
Now let me see, do I want to be darker?
Miss Durrant had found her supporters to consist of 5 sighted girls, a dozen or so blind girls, a few middle-aged men and women also blind, and no sighted males whatever. In the circumstances, there could be no doubt whatever that the section which would
I want to go darker.
With the lorries still loaded, there was little to delay them, and in the early afternoon they had driven away,
Let's see.
leaving Miss Durrant and her followers to sink or swim by their principles. Not until then had there been an
Yes, I think I do
opportunity
want to
to
go
survey the
darker. I
potentialities
want to go
of
darker.
this neighborhood. The main part of the house had been closed, but in the servants' quarters they found traces of recent occupation. Investigation of the kitchen garden later gave a pretty clear picture of what had happened to those who had
I
been
think I'm going to use this premier color,
man,
blue.
a woman, and a girl lay close together there in a scatter of spilled fruit. Nearby, a couple of triffids waited patiently with their roots dug in. Close to the model farm at the far end of the estate was a similar state of affairs. Whether the triffids had found their way into the park through some open gate, or some undocked specimens already there had broken free, was not clear. But they were a menace to be dealt with quickly before they could do more damage. Miss Durrant had sent off one-sighted girl to make a circuit of the wall, closing every door or gate, and herself had broken into the gun room. Despite inexperience, she and another young woman had succeeded in blowing the top off every triffid they could find, to the number of 26. No more had been seen within the enclosure, and it was hoped that no more existed there. The following day's investigation of the village had shown triffids about in considerable numbers. The surviving inhabitants were either those who had shut themselves into their houses to exist for as long as they could on what stores they had there, or those who had been lucky enough to encounter no triffids when they made brief foraging sorties. All who could be found had been collected and brought back to the manor. They were
I'm going to go
healthy,
over with the
most of them were
black
strong,
again.
but for the present at any rate they were more of a burden than a help. But there was not one of them
Okay, so I don't think I can do it anymore. My hands won't let me.
It seemed, had been more forthright and ruthless in extricating themselves from Coco's group formations, and most of them had returned in time to join the original party. Of Josella, the girl could tell me nothing. Clearly she had never heard the name before, and my attempts at description roused their recollections. While we were still talking, the electric lights in the room suddenly went on.
Shut
The girl looked up at them with the awkward expression of one receiving a revelation. She blew out the candles, and as she went on with her mending, she looked up at the bulbs occasionally as if to make certain they were still there. A few minutes later, Coco spoke. That was you, I suppose, I said, nodding at the lights. Yes.
Okay.
They got their own plant here,
So
might as well use up the petrol as let it evaporate.
remember to use this for his eyes. Not black, not brown. Well, I think long as it's light brown, nothing dark on his eyes. Just this. I'm gonna end up doing another picture of Smokey Robinson with his real eye color. Well, I hope that's his real eye color, not for sure, but let's go and work on his shirt and his necklace that he's wearing.
She was stunned by his tone.
Now I'm gonna use the premium color yellow. I think it's premium yellow, not for sure. For the necklace.
It's a self-created fault. Moreover, it's an affectation to consider yourself too spiritual to understand anything mechanical. It's a petty and a very silly form of vanity. Everyone starts by knowing nothing about anything, but God gives him and even her brains to find out with. Failure to use them is not a virtue to be praised.
Now I'm gonna use the black for his shirt.
She looked understandably annoyed. Coco himself had been looking annoyed from the time he came in. She said, "That's all very well, but different people's minds work on different lines. Men understand how machines and electricity work. Women just aren't much interested in that kind of thing, so Rob. Don't hand me a mess of myth and affectation. I'm not taking it," said Coco. "You know perfectly well that women can and do, or rather did, handle the most complicated and delicate machines when they took the trouble to understand them. What generally happens is that they're too lazy to take the trouble unless they have to. Why should they bother when the tradition of appealing helplessness can be rationalized as a womanly virtue, and the job just shoved off onto somebody else? Ordinarily, it's a pose that is not worth anyone's while to debunk. In fact, it's been fostered, and have played up to it by stoutly repairing the poor darling's vacuum cleaner and capably replacing the blown fuse. The whole charade has been acceptable to both parties. Tough practicality complements spiritual delicacy and charming dependence, and he is the mug who gets his hands dirty." He lunged on, well started now. "Hitherto, we have been able to afford to amuse ourselves with that kind of mental laziness and parasitism. In spite of generations of talk about the equality of the sexes, there has been much too great a vested interest in independence for women to dream of dropping it. They have made a minimum of necessary modifications to changing conditions, but they have always been the minimum and grudged for that." He paused. "You doubt that? Well, consider the fact that both the pert chit and the intellectual woman work the higher sensibility gag in their different ways, but when a war came, and brought with it a social obligation and sanction, both could be trained into competent engineers." "They weren't the good engineers," she remarked. "Everybody says that. The defensive mechanism in action. Let me point out that it was in nearly everybody's interest to say so."
To get the craze off, like smooth it out.
To some extent that was true. And why? Because nearly all of them not only had to learn hurriedly and without proper groundwork, but they also had to unlearn the habits carefully fostered for years of thinking such interests alien to them and too gross for their delicate natures. "I don't see why you have to come and pitch on me with all this," she said. "I'm not the only one who didn't start the wretched engine." Coco grinned. "You're quite right. It's unfair. They were simply finding the engine there ready to work and nobody doing a thing about it that started me off. Dumb futility gets me that way. And I think you might have said all that to Miss Durrant instead of me. Don't worry, I shall. But it isn't just her affair, it's yours and everyone else's. I mean that, you know. Times have changed rather radically. You can't any longer say, 'Oh dear, I don't understand this kind of thing.' You need somebody else to do it for you. Nobody's going to be muddle-headed enough to confuse ignorance with innocence now. It's too important. Nor is ignorance going to be cute or funny anymore. It's going to be dangerous, very dangerous." But let's all of us get around as soon as we can to understanding a lot of things in which we have no previous interest. Neither we nor those who depend on us are going to get through this lot. I don't see why you need to pour all your contempt for women onto me just because of one dirty old engine, she said peevishly. Coco raised his eyes. My God! And here have I been explaining that women have more capacities if they only take the trouble to use them. You said we were parasites. That wasn't a nice thing to say. I'm not trying to say nice things. What I did say was that in the world that has vanished, women had a vested interest in acting the part of parasites. And all that just because I don't happen to know anything about a smelly, noisy engine. Hell, said Coco, just drop that engine.
Okay, so
Then why? The engine just happened to be a symbol.
this
The
is
point is,
the
we all have to
cartoon.
learn not simply what
I'm
we
not
like,
finished
but as much
with
as
it
we
because I still
can
gotta do
running
the
a
list, but this
community
is
and
the
supporting
cartoon.
it. The men can't just
Smokey
sit in a voting
Robinson.
paper and hand the job to someone else.
Let him do
And it
his
will no longer be
list.
considered that a woman has
This the
fulfilled all her
premium
social
color pink.
obligations when she has prevailed
No,
on some man to support
peach.
her and provide her with a niche where she can irresponsibly produce babies for somebody else to educate. Well, I don't see what that has to do with engines. Listen, said Coco patiently. If you have a
And
baby,
go over
do you want
the
him to grow up to be a
toasted
savage
toffee
or
a
a
little.
civilized man? A civilized man, of course. Well, then you have to see to it that he has civilized surroundings and do it here. The standards he'll learn from us. We've all got to understand as much as we can and live as intelligently as we can in order to give him the most we can. It's going to mean hard work and more thinking for all of us. Change
With
conditions
the
must mean
premier
change
color white.
outcomes. The girl gathered up her mending. She regarded Coco
Get the
critically.
crazy all white.
With views like yours, I should think you find Mr. Beatley's party more congenial, she said. Here we have no
Alright, so
intention of
that's his
changing our
list.
outlook or of giving up our principles.
Now,
That's why we
behind
separate from the
here,
other party. So if the ways of
I
decent
got
character
another
people are
picture of
not going
Smokey
to
Robinson.
I should think you
But
better
this
go
is a
somewhere else.
picture of him in the 60s.
Very like a sniff.
The one, the 60s Smokey Robinson
Coco watched
looked
her.
quite different from the
When the
80s
door
Smokey
closed, he
Robinson.
expressed his feelings with a fishbowl's fluency.
But let me see. I'm gonna go and try
What did
to
you expect? I said.
trace it out.
Francis and addressed the girl as if she were a public meeting of delinquents and responsible for the whole Western social system as well. And then you're surprised when she laughed. You
See,
expected to see at least.
my hands is killing me. But yeah, use this for the eye color. Don't use that. Throw that there. Put this here. Either I'm gonna do this one, I still gonna end up throwing another picture of Smokey Robinson, you know. There's a lot of pictures that I need to go back over again because I rushed over it because of the time length that I have going on. So yeah, this the 60s Smokey Robinson right here.
That's where leadership comes in. The leader does the planning, but he's wise enough not to say so. As the changes become necessary, he slips them in as a concession. Temporarily, of course, to circumstances, but if he's good, he's slipping in the right bits for the ultimate shape. There are always overwhelming objections to any plan, but concessions have to be made to emergencies. Sounds Machiavellian to me. I like to see what I'm aiming at and go straight for it. Most people don't, even though they protest that they do. They prefer to be coaxed or wheedled, or even driven. That way they never make a mistake. If there is one, it's always due to something or somebody else. This going headlong for things as a mechanistic view of people in general aren't machines. They have minds of their own. Mostly pleasant minds at their easiest when they're in the familiar furrow. Doesn't sound as if you'd bet much on Beatley's chance of making a go of it. He's all planned. He'll have his troubles. But his party did choose. This lot is negative, I pointed out. It is simply here on account of its resistance to any kind of plan. I paused. Then I added. That girl was right about one thing, you know. You would be better off with this lot. Our reaction is a sample of what you get all round if you were to try to handle this lot your way. You can't drive a flock of sheep to market in a dead straight line, but there are ways of getting them there. You're being unusually cynical as well as metaphorical this evening, Coker observed. I objected to that. It isn't cynical to have noticed how a shepherd handles his sheep, or to regard human beings as sheep might be thought so by some. But less cynical and much on finding Josanna and Tansha. Weary though I was after the day's journey, I could not sleep. I lay awake in the darkness, feeling stranded and planless. So confidently had I assumed that she and the Beatley party would be there, that there had been no reason to consider any scheme beyond joining them. It now came home to me for the first time that even if I did succeed in catching up with them, I still might not find her. As she had only left Westminster District a short time before I arrived there in search of her, she must in any case have been
the same thing what I did to the other picture.
Obviously, the thing to do was to make detailed
This is what I'm going
inquiries
to
regarding
do on
everyone
this
who
one
arrived at
also.
Tyneside during the previous 2 days.
Like I said, this Smokey Robinson
For the present,
picture,
I must assume that she had
it's
come
the
this way.
60s. It's a lot different from the Smokey Robinson picture from the
But that meant to
80s.
see also that she
I
had
don't
gone
know
back to the
why
university and had found the chalked
his
address.
pictures from the
Whereas it was
60s
not
and
on the cards that she
70s
had
and
not known her at all,
80s, even
and sealed by
90s
the
and
whole
now
thing,
doesn't
taken the
all
workers look
match.
out of the reeking place
But,
that London had
you
become.
know, I don't know.
The thing I had to
So,
fight hardest against admitting was that she might have caught the disease, whatever it was, that had dissolved both our groups. I would not consider the possibility of that until I had to. In the
toasted
sleepless clarity of the small hours, I made one
toffee.
discovery.
I'm trying to think, do I
It
want
was
to
that my
change
desire
up?
to join the Beatley party was very secondary.
I just
My
use
wish to
go and
find
use
Josanna.
this.
If,
This the
when I did
Premier
find them,
Premier
she was
color
not with them,
gold.
well, the next move would have to wait upon the moment, but it would not be resignation. Coco's bed was already empty when I awoke, and I decided to devote my morning chiefly to inquiries. One of the troubles was that it did not seem to have occurred to anyone to take note of the names of those who had found Tansha uninviting and had passed on. Josanna's name meant nothing to anyone save those few who recollected it with disapproval. My description of her raised no memories that would stand detailed examination. Certainly there had been no girl in a navy blue sea suit, that I established, but then I could by no means be certain that she would still be dressed in that way. My inquiries ended by making everyone very tired of me and increasing my frustration. There was a faint possibility that the girl who had come and gone a day before our arrival might have been she. But I could not feel it likely that Josanna would have left so slight an impression on anyone's mind, even allowing for prejudice. Coco reappeared again at the midday meal. He had been engaged on an extensive survey of the premises. He had taken a tally of the livestock and the number of blind among it, inspected the farm equipment and machinery, found out about the source of pure water supplies, looked into the stores of feed, both human and stock, discovered how many of the blind girls had been afflicted before the catastrophe, and arranged classes of the others for them to train as best they could.
Now we'll get the Premier color yellow. I think this is creamy yellow.
Assurance for the vicar that there would be plenty of useful things for them to do, such as basket making and weaving, and he had done his best to dispel it with all helpful prospects. Encountering this Durrant, he had told her that unless it could somehow be contrived that the blind women should take part of the work off the shoulders of the sighted, the whole thing would break down within 10 days, and also that if the vicar's prayer for more blind people to join them should happen to be granted, the place would become entirely unworkable. He was embarking upon further observations, including the necessity for starting immediately to build up food reserves, and to begin the construction of devices which would enable blind men to do useful work, when she cut him short. He could see that she was a great deal more worried than she would admit, and the determination which had led her to sever relations with the other party caused her to blaze back at him unthankfully. She ended by letting him know that on her information neither he nor his views were likely to harmonize with the community.
Now we'll get the Premier color white and go over his face with it, especially in certain areas.
Slanderous, I said. What you mean is that her
With the
principles are so
white
impeccable that everything is her responsibility, and so it becomes her
before I
duty
get to
guide others.
shaving in.
Much the same thing, he said. But it sounds a lot better, I pointed out. He was thoughtful for a moment. She's going to run this place into one hell of a mess unless she gets right down to the job organizing it for the boys. Have you got the outfit over? I shook my head. I told him how my morning had been spent. You don't seem to have got much change for it. So, what? He said. I'm going on after the
And now I'm
local
going
party.
to get the toasted
Tell her she's
toffee
not with them.
and go over him with it.
I'm just hoping she is. She must be. Where else would she be?
My
We haven't told too many people that we're having a baby. It was just.
I reckon I'll come along with you. It's likely that crowd won't be anyone.
my Google came up, so excuse that. Google came up. Let's see.
I can see this one's going to do the same. More slowly and maybe more nastily. It's weird, isn't it? Decent intentions seem to be the most dangerous things around just now. A damn shame because this place could be managed, in spite of the proportionate crime. Everything it needs is lying about for the taking and will be for a while yet. It's only organising that's one thing. And willingness to be organised, I suggest. And you agree? You know, the trouble is that in spite of all that's happened, this thing hasn't got home to these people yet. They don't want to turn to. They'll be making it too final. At the back of their minds, they're all camping out, hanging on, waiting for something or other. True, but scarcely surprising, I admit it. It took plenty to convince us, and they've not seen what we have. And somehow, it does seem less final and less immediate out here in the country. Well, they've got to start realising it soon if they're going to get through, Coca said, looking round the hall again. There's no miracle coming to save them. Give them time. They'll come to it as we did. You're always in such a hurry. Time's no longer money, you know. Money isn't important any longer, but time is. They ought to be thinking about the harvest, rigging a mill to grind flour, saying about winter
Now I can get the yellow and go over the yellow again.
Not as urgent as all that, Coca. There must be huge stocks of flour in the towns, and by the look of things, mighty few of us to use it. We can live on capital for a long while yet. Surely the
I'm
immediate
making
choice
this
is to
picture
find
a lot
how to work
different from
before they
other
really have to
pictures.
get down to it.
I think
All the same, unless
I'm
somebody's got something else
experimenting.
they're going to crack up. It only needs that to happen to one or two of them, and the place will get
No,
proper.
just trying some things out.
I have to concede that. Later in the afternoon, I managed to find Miss Durrant. No one else seemed to know or care where Michael Beadley and his lot had gone, but I could not believe that they had not left behind some indications for those who might follow. Miss Durrant was not pleased. At first, I thought she was going to refuse to tell me. It was not due solely to my implied preference for other company. The loss of even an uncongenial, able-bodied man was serious in the circumstances. Nevertheless, she preferred not to show the weakness of asking me to stay. In the end, she said curtly, "They were intending to make for somewhere near Beaminster in Dorset. I can tell you no more than that." I went back and told Coca. He looked around him. Then he shook his head, with a touch of regret. "Okay," he said. "We'll check out of this dump tomorrow." He spoke
I'm
like
gonna
a
use
pioneer.
no, not yet. Not yet before I use that. I'm gonna get the premium color black and go with his eyebrows with. That's something did not change. His eyebrows. His eyebrows did not change.
There had been a question whether we should not take a handier vehicle and leave the trucks for the benefit of the Tyneside people, but I was reluctant to abandon mine.
Like I said, right now I think I'm just experimenting with Smokey Robinson picture. Just taking that time to experiment.
There was a selection of things made with consideration of what might be difficult to find outside a large town. Such things as a small lighting set.
Now I don't want to make a mistake again with
Pieces of good tools.
the eyes.
All these things would be available later for the taking. But there was going to be an interlude when it would be advisable to keep away from towns of any size. The Tyneside people had the means to fetch supplies from towns where there was no sign yet of disease. A couple of loads would not make a great deal of difference to them either way, so in the end, we went as we had come. The weather still held good. On the higher ground, there was still little taint in the fresh air, though most villages had become unpleasant. Rarely we saw a still figure lying in a field or by the roadside. And just as in London, the main instinct seemed to have been to hide away in shelter of some kind. Most of the villages showed empty streets. On the
I'm
countryside
gonna get the
around
crazy
them
out
was
white.
deserted as if the whole thing had been
Smooth everything out with it.
spirited away.
Like I said, I'm gonna do another picture. I'm just experimenting right now.
From our road, we had a view of the whole of Steeple Honey as we descended the hill. It clustered
Yeah, I'm just experimenting. I prefer experimenting than actually doing a cartoon and then to actually make portraits and stuff.
On the left, at the far end of the bridge, one house stood slightly aslant from the road so that it faced obliquely towards us. And inside hung from a bracket on its wall. And from the window immediately above that, something white was being waved. As we came closer, I could see the man who was leaning out in front of me, flagging us with a towel. I judged that he must be blind, otherwise he would have come out into the road to intercept us. He was waving too vigorously for a sick man. I signaled back to Coco and pulled up as we cleared the bridge. The man at the window dropped his towel. He shouted something which I could not hear above the noise of the engines and disappeared. We both switched off. It was so quiet that we could hear the clumping of the man's feet on the wooden stairs inside the house. The door opened, and he stepped out, holding both hands before him. Like lightning, something whipped out of the hedge on his left and struck him. He gave a single high-pitched shout and dropped where he stood. I picked up my shotgun and climbed out of the cab. I circled a little until I could make out the Triffitt skulking in the shadows of a bush. Then I blew the top of it. Coco was out of his truck too and standing close beside me. He looked at the man on the ground, and then at the shorn Triffitt. It was... Damn it, he'd come and been waiting for him. He said, it must just have happened. He couldn't have known he'd come out of that door. I mean, he couldn't. Could it? Or could it? It was a remarkably neat piece of work, I said. Coco turned uneasy eyes on me. Damn neat. You don't really believe. It was a kind of conspiracy not to believe things about Triffitt, I said, and added, there might be more around here. We looked at the adjacent cover over carefully and drew blank. We could do with a drink, suggested Coco. But for the dust on the counter, the small bar at the inn looked normal. We poured a whiskey each. Coco downed his in one. He turned a worried look on me. I didn't like that. Not at all, I didn't. You ought to know a lot more about these bloody things than most people do. I mean, it wasn't. I mean, it must just have happened to be there, mustn't it? I think. I began. Then I stopped, listening to the staccato drumming outside. I walked over and opened the window. I let the already trimmed Triffitt have the other barrel turned, this time just above the bowl. The drumming stopped. The trouble about Triffitt, I said as we poured another drink, is chiefly the things we don't know about them. I told him one or two of Walter's.
So this is just an experiment picture that I did of Smokey Robinson.
Don't seriously suggest that they're talking.
But I'm gonna do another one.
I've never made up my mind.
I'm doing another
I'll go
one.
so far as to say I'm sure it's a sequel
Maybe
of
not
some
so
sort.
soon because I got somebody else in mind that I'm ready to do. But
I
eventually,
didn't know more about them than anyone else that I know.
I'm gonna turn this off
I ejected the two spent cartridge
and
cases.
trace out somebody
You
else
mentioned their advantage
for
over a blind man.
tomorrow.
A number of years ago that was.
Because I got somebody else that I got in mind that I want to
It's a funny coincidence. Impossible as ever, I said.
create
Any stroke of fate can be made to look like a funny coincidence if you try
somebody
hard
else
enough
in
and wait
mind
long enough.
if I don't
We
get
drank up
bored.
and turned to go. Coco glanced out of the window. Then he caught my arm, pointed. Two Triffitts had swayed round the corner and were making for the hedge which had been the hiding place of the first. I waited until they paused and then decapitated both of them. We left by the window, which was out of range of any Triffitt cover, and looked about us carefully as we approached the lorries. Another coincidence? Or were they coming to see what had happened? We cleared the village, running on along a small cross-country road.